Welcome to Jomies. Today we'll be starting our JavaScript class fully. So let's get started. So we're going to be working on a new file. So to create a new file, just click on this top here. Then if you are using Sublime, then Ctrl X to save your file. We're going to be saving it in our JS class 3 folder, and we're going to call this JS code_code .html. We're still going to be working with HTML, so that's why we're going to save this with as .html. Okay, write the HTML tab to bring out the structure of the website. Now this is JS class. This is JS class. This is JS class. Save this. Then, before we get into JavaScript fully, what is JavaScript? What is JavaScript? JavaScript is the programming language of the web. JavaScript is the world's most popular programming language. JavaScript is the programming language of the web. That's the language you use to write code on your web, especially for the front end. JavaScript is easy to learn, very easy to learn. This tutorial will teach you JavaScript from basic to advanced. So let's get started. Let's start writing some code. Okay. JavaScript can change HTML content. JavaScript can actually change HTML content. To do that, let's say we have something like a H1, okay, let's use small letters, H1 tab. Then we have this is a board here. Now, and we have another button here, BU button, and we call this change content. Change content. Don't forget, this is a boy. Then this one is a button, change content. Let's view this on our browser to see what we have. Open in browser. Okay, this is a boy. Then the button says change content. We can use JavaScript to change the content of what is inside this H1, which is what is inside this H1, which is this is a boy. We can use JavaScript to change it to any content of our choice. To do that, we'll just come here and write on click function. Okay, we'll give this a ID of demo. Then we'll say document dot get elements by ID. By, it's not tagging, we need ID here. By ID. Then we say hash demo Don't forget this the name of the ID. We're collecting this name of this ID. So we say demo document.getElement by ID, demo dot inner HTML. HTML should be equal to this is not a boy. Try something else. Try something else. So if we view this on our browser, we have something like this is a boy. On click of this button, why is that not working? Document.getElement by ID. By ID demo.inner HTML. This is not a boy. Try something else. Refresh. Demo. Well, this is not a boy. Try something else. This is not a boy. Try something else. Okay, that's because the reason we are having some issue with our code. If you notice, when this hash was here, the code was not working. That was because if we are using documents.getElement by ID, then we must not include hash, because this place is expecting the quote here is expecting the name of the ID instead of telling it that it is a ID. So you can just write the name of the ID and your code will run. The code will run. On click, it changes to this is not a boy. Try something else. So JavaScript accepts both singles and double quotes. JavaScript accepts both singles and double quotes. If you notice our code here, we use single quotes to write this one. We can also use double quotes. We can also use double quotes to quote our content. JavaScript accepts both, but whenever you're using double quote or single quote, make sure you check this the HTML so that it doesn't affect your HTML code. But if you're working with a plain JavaScript file, you are allowed to use any code. Make sure you arrange your code where that's the most important thing. JavaScript can change HTML attribute value. JavaScript can change HTML attribute value. JavaScript, you see this attributes here. Maybe we'll give this a class of red. Then we have our style. tab, then on dot red color of red, dot yellow should be color of yellow. So let's just comment this at cannot see. So this is what we actually make this code to run. You cannot say button. This is a new button tab, change color, then give this on click, still using the on click function, on click to be by default. We've given this a class color of red. So if we view it in our browser, we have a red text. This is a boy, but we don't want that red color. We want to change it with JavaScript. We can do that by saying on click document dot get elements by ID, then the name of get elements by ID. This is the ID we are getting. Then we are targeting the attribute, the class name, which is this class attribute. So dot class name, we need the class name, this class name is equal to then the name of the class you need. The name of the class we need here is yellow. So yellow, we need a yellow color. So if we don't forget the code document dot get element by ID demo dot class name is equal to yellow. Then if we go to our browser to refresh now, then click, it will change the color to yellow. So we can also change this to red by doing something similar. If we need a red, if we need it to go back to a green, maybe we need a green color, we can just write let's say green color, green, then green color, then we'll say color to be green. Then just to change here to green. When you come back to your browser, make sure you always refresh your code, because what JavaScript does is that it saves on your front end code, which is it saves on your browser. So if you don't refresh your code, you'll be working on the previous version of the code. So make sure you always refresh your browser before testing your code. So now if we click on this button, it should change the color to green. Color. That's how you can use button to change. That's how you can use JavaScript to change colors and you can also use that to change background. You can also use that to change, depending on what you want to do, you can use it to change the font size and so on. So let's move forward. JavaScript can change HTML styles. JavaScript can change HTML styles. So in the case of what we just did, although we were actually changing the style color, which this style, which is the colors, how the design looks like, but we can actually use JavaScript to change the style of a website without using it to change the attribute directly. So to do that, let's just comment this code out. We don't need it to run. We already have this, so we can just comment it out. So to do that, we can say button in button here, button change style. Change style. Then on click function, on click, then we need we want to change the font size. Now in this case, let's give this a font size. This is in red, so red. Okay, font size of sorry, font size of, let's say 15 pixel, 16 pixel. So by default we have the font size to 16 pixel. We have the font size at 60 pixel. Then now we want to use JavaScript to change the font size to a bigger font. So we say documents dot get element by ID documents dot get element by ID dot style dot font size. We want the font size, just the font size. In case of font size, we'll be using something like this in CSS for font size, but in the case of JavaScript you don't use this / because it means another thing entirely in JavaScript. So what we're going to do now is to remove the slash, then change this to a capital letter. We don't need this minus sign, this slash, so we're going to remove it and change this to a capital X, because in JavaScript if you're adding a new text you can just do that by using a capital letter instead. That's why you see get, then this one capital element, then you see this one capital letter by, then you see this one a capital letter ID. That's why you have something like that. So we're going to remove this now. We'll change this to a capital letter X. Then font size, within the font size, just font size to be equal to, let's say 60 pixel. We want it to be very obvious so that we know our code is working. Okay, let's say 60 pixel. Make sure you always put this inside a quote. Make sure you always put this inside a quote. It should be in the text format. X, if you just put it like this, JavaScript will see this as a variable, and variable is not allowed here, so you can just use single quotes to make it a string. Then you go to your browser to refresh. You have the font size to 16 pixel. On click of the button, why this code not working. We have some errors in our JavaScript code. Document.getElement by, okay, we've not included the name of the ID, which is demo. It means the demo dot font size to be equal to, so this should work now. You refresh your browser, make sure you only refresh your browser before testing your code. Then you click on the button, changes to this is a boy with a bigger font. So that's how to use JavaScript to change HTML styles. So let's move forward. JavaScript can show HTML elements. JavaScript can show HTML elements. JavaScript can show HTML elements. Okay, let's say we have this to be displaying display none, display none. That is, it is not in our screen. Let's just comment this out so that we can use another button. Show demo. You come to our browser now and refresh, you will notice we don't have that H1 in our screen again. So we can, because we display none. So we can actually use JavaScript to show that content after your page loads. So to do that, we're going to give this an onClick. Still an onClick. We're using onClick for now. Although there are many functions you can use: on click, on load, on key up, on key press, on key down, on focus, just like that. So, but for now we choose to use on click. So on click function to be document dot get element by ID within demo, then demo dot, we want to use the style to the JavaScript to show the content. So we say dot style, don't forget display the style. So from dot style dot display, we mean display to be equal to block. So on click, we're going to change this to a block level element to show the content. Block. Save your file, come to your browser, make sure you always save your file. Then you click on this button, it changes to block level element, which is a display block. So it changes to it's displayed, it shows in our screen because we are displaying it block. So do you know that JavaScript is completely different from Java? JavaScript is a different programming language from Java. JavaScript was invented by Braden Eich in 1995 and became an ECMA standard in 1997. So let's move forward. JavaScript is the programming language of the web. So if you notice what we'll be doing, we've been using JavaScript to change the content of the page. So we're using it to program the page, how the page works, how if user interacts with the page, the results they get. So that's what we have been using JavaScript to do. Okay, JavaScript can also hide HTML element. JavaScript can also hide HTML element. Let's do that right away. Let's do that. Comment this out. We need another. The reason we are commenting our code out is because we don't want it to run. We don't want this code to run. We don't want to see these buttons. That's why we are commenting our code out. So button tab, we want to hide this. Don't need this again. Hiding let's say hide HTML. Hide HTML. Go to our browser. So go to our browser and refresh. This is a boy, then the button is hide HTML. So we want to hide this HTML. Now this is a boy, we want to hide it. This is a boy. We can just do that by saying on click function document dot get element by ID. We need the demo. We need this ID, this demo ID. So demo dot style dot display to be equals to none. We don't want it to show on our screen, so we're going to display it now. So refresh, then you click display now. We don't have it on our screen again. So that was how to hide JavaScript. That's how to hide HTML content with JavaScript. So let's move forward. So now we've been learning how to use line JavaScript to hide content in our page. Now let's move to the script tag. We have something like this. If we don't want our code to be mixed up with our HTML file, there's a way we can organize our JavaScript code to be written in one file while our HTML file will be written in another file. And there's also a way we can write our JavaScript file underneath our code or at the end of our code. To do that, you need the script tag. Script tag. Then it has a type of text /yes. We can also remove this. It will also read as a JavaScript code, but we're leaving that for now. So we can write chunks of JavaScript code here, and it will also be executed once the action is triggered, once the action is called. So let's start writing some code here. We can use this JavaScript. We can use JavaScript to push content into an HTML element. So let's try that out. Say document notice the actual content of this page. It says this is a boy. Document dot, we want to change it now. Document dot get element. Document dot get element by ID. Document dot get element by ID. ID. We need the demo. Then dot inner HTML to be equal to now we can use single string or double string here. We can decide to use single string or double string here, but for now let's just use double string. Document dot get element by ID demo dot inner HTML to be just testing this, just testing this out. So we'll save and view this in our browser. We have just testing this out. Despite there is a content inside this H2, sorry, not H1, this H2, we were still able to push this content into the H2 with JavaScript. So that's how JavaScript works. You can actually use JavaScript to push content into an HTML or an HTML tag or something similar. So let's continue with our code. That was for pushing content into an HTML element. Okay, you can either write JavaScript code at the head of your code, or you can write it at the bottom of your code. But I prefer writing JavaScript code at the bottom because it makes your site load faster. Unlike keeping the JavaScript at the head of your code, it has to load all the JavaScript code first before it will start reading your code. That's why you see sometimes your browser will just be loading and loading. There's no content to the page, but the browser is still loading and loading and loading to take time to execute. But if you keep your code at the bottom of your page, you will first of all have your content. That's why some websites, when you visit them, you will have your content first, and it's still loading some extra content at the background behind the scene. Those are JavaScript codes that are being loaded to your browser. So let's move to the next one. So we can also bring out content to the browser in JavaScript. We can put our content in different ways by writing into an HTML using inner HTML, which is this one we just tried out. Then we can also use the write function. We can also use window.alert. We can also use console log. Okay, let's try out window.alert first. So for in the case of window.alert, we can just declare a variable var x, let's say var x is equal to this is Jumi X training. This is Jumi X training. Save. Now once we have output this to our browser, we can use the alert. We can say window. If you just write alert, it will still work fine, but if you want to be more professional, you can say window dot alert function to be on variable x. We want variable x. So if we go to our browser now and refresh, we have this is Jumi X training in our browser. So that's one way you can also print. That's one way you can also display HTML data to your browser. Okay, we can also use the console log. You can also just comment this out. We also have comments in JavaScript. You use double quotes for comments, for single line comments. So we just commented that out. So we want to use console log. Let's say console dot log function. So we need x to be console log. So if you refresh, you're not seeing anything in your browser, but if you open your console, it should be there. This is Jumi X training. See it here, this is Jumi X training. So if we change this to this is Jumi X training, please join us. To change this to please join us and refresh, it will change to this is Jumi X training, please join us. So in the case of console log, most times when you want to use console log is for debugging purpose. Maybe you having a code, you define a variable and you want to see the value of your code, you can just console log the value and just view it in your console log. It's actually for developing purpose, and you can actually make use of it. It will be very helpful when you start writing JavaScript code. When you start handling multiple codes, you will need the console log, because sometimes when you're writing your code, it doesn't even answer you. You just be looking at your code, you click on the button, maybe you've told your code to do something, you click on the button and nothing even happens. Your code will just be looking at you. So in that case, you can just console log your errors, or you can console log the values. You go to your browser to view what is inside the console log to know how to go about your code. So let's continue with our code. That was for the case of console log. using HTML. To access an HTML, JavaScript can use document.getElement by ID method. That's the one we just described. ID. The ID attribute defines the ID attribute defines the HTML element. The inner HTML property defines the HTML content. The ID attribute defines the HTML elements. That's what you use to identify the HTML element. Then the inner HTML property defines the HTML content. That's what you want to put inside the HTML element. So let's go to the next one. How to declare variable. You can declare variable in JavaScript just like we've declared this variable already. You can use the var, var, then the value, the name of the variable, then the value of the variable. This is the key to declare a variable. Then the name of the variable, single quote for string or double quote for string, then the name, the value of the variable. So you can write some statements in JavaScript by saying JavaScript code accords a piece of JavaScript code is called statement. You can write just like this one. This one is a statement. This one is a statement. So we can also write a JavaScript code, another statement by saying var y is equal to 1 is equal to 10. Then var, this one is a statement already. Then we need another statement, var age is equal to 5 is equal to 5. So this one is another statement already. So we need this one is another statement already. So we need another statement. We now say var t. Let's use t. Var t is equal to y minus h. Since we already have it as a variable, we can just call it here, and it will have the value of what we declared it to be. So this one has a value of 10, this one has a value of 5. So we say 10 minus 5. So let's alert function, alert our answer. We want to alert t. Save and refresh. We have 5. This page says 5, so the value there is 5. I don't want this video to be too long. At most it should be around 1 hour. So we can also declare multiple variables in a single line. To do that, we just use a quote to differentiate them. You can just say var a, var a to be equals to 1. Then end the line. Say var b is equal to var b is equal to 2, and we'll put the line. Var c is equal to 3. Var d is equal to 4. Var e is equal to 5. So if we just come here and alert any of the value, we still have the value as the same thing like we define it. So if we say var, if we say alert method, then alert a, we'll get a value of 1 because the value of a here is 1. Although we have all our variables in one line, it will still read it like a separate line because we actually end each of the lines with a quotation. Okay, if we say alert b, we save, we refresh, we have 2. If we say alert c, we have a value of 3. Alert c, we have 3, just like that. So we've come to the end of the class for today. We're going to continue from here in our next class. If people enjoyed the video, and please make sure you learn some other extra codes on your own. Go to W3 School, go to the JavaScript tutorial there, and make sure you learn each of the example there, and make sure you are very good, master them, make sure you are very good at them before the next class, because in our next class we're going to be writing some good JavaScript codes, and we want you guys to follow up. So do yourself a favor by going to W3 School tutorial to follow up with some of the code there. So see you in our next video, and please make sure you subscribe. Thank you.